The smell of fresh coffee filled the air as I entered the small cafe in town, a space that had become a refuge for me. The walls were adorned with colorful paintings, many of them works by local artists, but on that day, I couldn't feel the same inspiration that usually surrounded me. The vibrant brushstrokes seemed to mock my inability to create something that satisfied me. It was as if I were trapped on a blank canvas, unsure of how to begin drawing my story. The bell on the door chimed softly behind me as I made my way to a table in a corner, away from the hustle and bustle of the other customers. I sat down, opening my sketchbook, but the pages remained blank, reflecting my state of mind. The morning light streamed through the windows, softly illuminating the space, yet I couldn't concentrate. I looked again at the paintings on the walls, trying to find a spark of inspiration, but nothing seemed to connect. Then, I decided to look outside, to the quiet street. The sun was shining brightly, and people were passing by, each with their own story. That's when my eyes met those of a man outside. He was crouched down, adjusting the lens of a camera, capturing the moment. There was something about him that caught my attention. His tousled hair, and the way his expression lit up as he focused on the scene in front of him stirred a wave of curiosity within me. I didn't know his name, but I already felt there was something special about his presence. "Who are you?" I thought as I watched him. He lifted his head, and our eyes met again. A brief moment, yet it felt like an eternity. I felt my heart race, a sensation I hadn't experienced in a long time. The connection was instant, as if something inside me was awakening. The colors in my sketchbook seemed more vibrant, and the idea of creating something began to take shape in my mind. I lost track of time as I watched him through the window until suddenly, he stood up and walked into the cafe. My heart raced. He approached the counter and ordered a coffee, and I wondered if he had noticed me too. What intrigued me most was how at ease he seemed, as if he were at home in this place. I, on the other hand, felt like a stranger in a world I no longer understood. He walked toward the area where I was sitting, and I quickly looked away, trying to focus on my sketchbook again. But it was impossible not to notice the way he moved, confident yet a little distant. When he finally sat down at the table next to mine, I could feel the electricity in the air. It was as if we were in a parallel universe where nothing else mattered. "Hi," he said, with a smile that seemed to light up the entire room. "Are you drawing?" His voice was deep and smooth, and I almost lost the ability to respond. "Oh, actually, I'm trying," I replied, trying to sound casual. "But it doesn't seem like I'm doing very well." "Sometimes, the best ideas come when you least expect them," he said, leaning in a little closer. "By the way, I'm Jake." "Sarah," I replied, feeling a wave of warmth rise to my cheeks. "Nice to meet you." He looked at my sketchbook and smiled. "Can I see?" I hesitated. What he would see there were doodles and sketches that didn't do justice to what I wanted to express. But on an impulse, I pushed the sketchbook in his direction. "Sure, but don't judge me too harshly." Jake opened the sketchbook, examining each page closely. "Wow," he exclaimed. "You have talent. These doodles have a unique energy." "Thank you," I said, surprised by his sincerity. "I'm just trying to find my voice again." "I understand. Sometimes, we need a little push to remember what truly inspires us," he said, looking deeply into my eyes. There was something in his gaze that made me feel as though he saw through my uncertainties, as if he understood me in a way no one else could. "You're a photographer, right?" I asked, trying to shift the focus of the conversation to him, a bit shyly. "Yeah, I am," Jake replied, his smile widening. "I love capturing moments, especially those that go unnoticed by people. It's like telling stories without words." "That's amazing," I said, fascinated. "You must have a lot of stories to tell." "Some good, some not so much," he said, a hint of melancholy in his voice. Life has its complexities, just like art. Our dialogue flowed naturally, as if we were old friends who hadn't seen each other in years. Hours passed, and I got lost in his words, in the way he spoke about his experiences, his feelings, and the beauty he found in everyday life. It was as if a light had been turned on inside me, and I was beginning to see the world with new eyes. Do you have any idea what you're going to create next? Jake asked as we sipped our coffees. Actually, no, I confessed. I'm in a creative block. It's frustrating. Maybe you need a new perspective, he suggested, his intense gaze making me feel like he genuinely cared. How about going for a walk? I'd love to show you some places that might inspire you. The idea intrigued me and made me nervous at the same time. I didn't know if it was wise to accept an invitation from a stranger, but something about Jake told me he was different. That would be great, I said, more excited than I expected. When would you like to do that? How about now? He asked, his expression lighting up as if he had a brilliant idea. I know a perfect spot for photographs, and maybe you can find some inspiration. Let's go, I responded, already getting up from the table. Excitement took over me, and suddenly, everything felt more possible. As we walked together, the conversation kept flowing. Jake shared stories about his adventures as a photographer, and I lost myself in the way he described each moment. The world around us faded away, and all that mattered was the connection forming between us. Before we knew it, we were standing in a small park, surrounded by lush trees and colorful flowers. The sun filtered through the leaves, creating a pattern of light and shadow that danced around us. It's beautiful here, I said, taking a deep breath of the fresh air. Yeah, it's one of my favorite spots, Jake replied, adjusting the camera hanging around his neck. I'll take some photos. You can help me choose the best angles. Of course. I was so excited that I hardly noticed time passing as he captured images. With each click of the camera, I felt a wave of inspiration starting to flow within me, as if the colors of the world were intensifying. After a few minutes, he turned to me, a satisfied smile on his face. Should we take a break? How about we sit for a bit? We sat on a bench under the shade of a tree, and the conversation continued. I spoke about my art, my frustrations, and how I felt lost. He listened intently, his eyes shining with understanding. You have an amazing story, Sarah, he said, his voice soft. Don't give up on telling that story through your art. Sometimes, we just need a fresh start. Thank you, Jake. Your words mean a lot to me, I said, feeling a deep connection forming between us. As the sun began to set, painting the sky orange and pink, Jake looked at me with an expression I couldn't decipher. Can I ask you something? Of course, I said, nervous. Can I have your number? He asked, a bit hesitant. I'd like to keep in touch. Maybe we can work together on your art. My heart raced. I wanted to give him my number. I wanted to see him again, but a part of me hesitated. Yes, of course, I replied, smiling shyly. It's 555-1234. Great. I'll send you a message, so you have my number too, he said, and I couldn't stop smiling. The thought of continuing to see Jake excited me, but also made me a little nervous. What did that mean for me? As we walked back to the cafe, a strange feeling began to settle in my stomach. A mix of excitement and apprehension. What did I really know about Jake? What was he keeping to himself? But at that moment, those questions felt distant. The days that followed our cafe meeting were like a storm of emotions. Every time I entered my studio, the soft morning light filtered through the window, casting dancing shadows on the walls, but I couldn't focus. The brushstrokes that once flowed naturally now felt hesitant and lifeless. The only thing filling my mind was Jake. That morning, I was sitting at one of the cafe tables, a place that now felt more like a sanctuary than just a social space. The aroma of fresh coffee mingled with the soft sound of conversations around me. I looked at the door, anxiously awaiting Jake's arrival. And when he finally appeared, my heart leaped with joy. He wore a fitted black t-shirt that showcased his muscles and a leather jacket that seemed tailor-made for him. His messy hair, as if he had just stepped out of a photo shoot, added to his charm. "Hey, you won't believe the new photo series I took," he said, his eyes sparkling with excitement as he approached the table. He sat across from me, and I couldn't help but notice how the warmth of his presence enveloped me. "Hi, I really can't believe it, but I want to hear all about it," I replied, trying to hide how anxious I was. The way he talked about photography was contagious. Jake had a way of describing each click as if it were a story, and I got lost in his words. I went to a park in the neighboring town and found incredible light at dawn. The sky was tinged with orange and pink. It was like nature was painting a live picture. He gestured, and I could almost see the image he was describing. I took several photos, but one particularly stood out to me. It was of a woman sitting on a bench, reading a book. She seemed so immersed in the story that the world around her disappeared. "Wow, that sounds beautiful. You must have captured something really special," I said, admiring him. The way he spoke about his clicks made me feel like I was seeing the world through his eyes. He didn't just take photos, he told stories. After several conversations and laughter, we started meeting regularly. Each encounter was a mix of lightness and intensity, as if we were dancing on a thin thread that connected us more and more. I realized that Jake wasn't just a photographer, he was a storyteller, and I was eager to be part of his narrative. One afternoon, we were sitting in the cafe, and he began to open up more about his life. "I've always loved capturing moments. Photography helps me understand the world, to connect with people," he said, looking at his coffee as if he were recalling something deep. "And you? What inspires you to paint?" he asked, lifting his gaze and focusing on me. It was as if he genuinely wanted to know. "Sometimes it's life itself. Other times, it's feelings I can't put into words," I replied, hesitating for a moment. "But lately, I've been feeling blocked, as if something is keeping me from creating." He tilted his head, watching me with an intensity that made me feel exposed. "Maybe you just need someone to make you feel alive again," he said, and his words echoed in my mind. I knew he was referring to himself, and my heart raced in response. Time passed, and the connection between us deepened, but something began to bother me. During one of those meetings, while we were talking and laughing, Jake received a message on his phone. I noticed his expression change instantly. He looked at the screen, frowned, and quickly put the phone back in his pocket, as if he were hiding something I shouldn't see. "Is everything okay?" I asked, concern seeping into my voice. "Yeah, just work stuff," he replied, but the hesitation in his voice intrigued me. His worried look didn't fade, and I couldn't help the curiosity that began to consume me. In the following days, the image of Jake's phone and the message he ignored wouldn't leave my mind. I noticed he was more distant, and the connection that had once been so strong began to feel a little fragile. It was as if there were an invisible barrier between us, and I didn't know how to break it. On one of the nights we spent together, the atmosphere was charged with a mix of romance and uncertainty. After a candlelit dinner, we were in my studio, surrounded by paintings and brushes, and soft music filled the spaces between us. Jake was looking at one of my works, and I could have sworn I saw him smile at something I couldn't see. "You have an incredible talent, Sarah. These colors, this emotion, it's like each painting has a life of its own," he said, his voice low and filled with admiration. "Thank you, Jake. That means a lot coming from you," I replied, feeling warmth rise in my cheeks. But deep down, doubt still lingered. As the night wore on and the mood became more intimate, Jake leaned in closer to me, and our lips met in a soft, sweet kiss. The world around us faded away, and I surrendered completely to that moment. But as he wrapped his arms around me, the image of the ignored message returned to my mind like a shadow I couldn't shake off. After a while, I realized Jake had left his phone on the table. Curiosity consumed me, and my heart raced as I thought about what I might find. He had always been so private about his personal life, and now there was something that seemed hidden beneath the surface. "Jake, you forgot your phone," I said, trying to sound casual as I picked up the device. He didn't respond immediately, and I hesitated. My heart was pounding, but the temptation to uncover the truth was stronger than my hesitation. In a moment of impulse, I unlocked the phone. The screen illuminated my face, and I saw a series of messages that left my heart in my throat. Conversations that made it clear there was a woman in his life, someone with whom he shared secrets and laughter. The feeling of betrayal and confusion wrapped around me like a heavy blanket. "Sarah, what are you doing?" Jake's voice sliced through the silence, and I looked at him, feeling like the ground had vanished beneath my feet. I just wanted to know," I murmured, my voice faltering. He stepped closer, and I realized he was in shock. The trust one had placed in him began to crumble before my eyes. "Please, let me explain," he said, and I realized that the night that had seemed so perfect was about to turn into a nightmare. The cafe was busier than usual. The aroma of fresh coffee and freshly baked pastries lingered in the air, but I could barely feel it. My thoughts were racing, my mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. After discovering the messages on Jake's phone, my heart was torn between the pain of betrayal and the hope that it was just a misunderstanding. The intimate conversations I had read left me perplexed, and a quiet anger grew inside me. What was I supposed to do? How could I confront him without him realizing the storm I was experiencing inside? I sat at a table in the corner of the cafe, staring at the door, waiting for Jake. The clinking of cups and the murmur of conversations around me became distant sounds. With every passing second, the tension grew, and I questioned whether I would have the courage to discuss what I had discovered. When I finally saw Jake walk in, my heart raced. He looked so at ease, so carefree. The cafe light illuminated his face in a way I had always considered beautiful, but now it seemed almost cruel. He had no idea of the storm I was about to unleash. "Hi, Sarah." Jake smiled when he saw me and approached, placing his hand on the table as if it were a natural gesture. "Sorry I'm late. The traffic was horrible." "No problem," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "You seem good." "I was thinking about us," he said, sitting down and crossing his arms. "I really enjoy spending time with you." "Me too," I murmured, absorbing his words. But doubt consumed me. How could I continue this conversation without mentioning the messages? "Jake, can we talk about something?" "Of course. What's wrong?" He seemed genuinely concerned, which only added to my confusion. I hesitated, the knot in my throat tightening. "Actually, I found your phone on the table the last time we were together." I could feel the heat rising in my face, but I continued. "I saw some messages." Jake frowned, and the confused expression on his face made me feel a mix of relief and anxiety. "Messages? What messages?" That question cut through me like a knife. Messages from a woman. They were intimate. The last word came out bitterly, as if I were spitting poison. "Are you in a relationship with her?" He took a deep breath, and I realized he was bracing for a response. But instead of clarifying, he seemed to hesitate. "Sarah, it's not what it looks like." "Then what is it?" Anger and pain intertwined and propelled me to continue. "You are talking to another woman, and it seems like there's something more." How can I believe you're not cheating on me? Listen, please. He gestured, trying to defend himself. The woman I was talking to is just a friend. We've known each other for years, but there's no romantic relationship. But the messages were so personal, Jake. How do you expect me to believe you? How can I know it's not just another lie? He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I knew well. It was his way of dealing with pressure. I understand your mistrust, but I swear there's nothing between us. I was just trying to help her through a tough time. She had some personal issues, and I was there to support her. So, you're telling me you're that close to her and I didn't know about it? I asked, my voice rising. How can I feel secure in a relationship if you have a friend who is so intimate with you? Jake leaned forward, his eyes locked onto mine. Sarah, I want you to believe me. You've become very important to me. I'm here, not because of her, but because of you. You're the one I wanted to be with. His words were like a bomb, but I was still confused. And what if she doesn't understand that? What if she tries to interfere? I don't want to be the second option, Jake. I can't. You would never be a second option to me, he said, his gaze serious. I'm trying to distance myself from all of this, but it's not easy. I don't want you to suffer because of my past. But you can't just expect me to forget what I saw. The messages were there, Jake. They existed, and now I don't know if I can ignore them. My heart felt heavy. Every word I spoke weighed like lead. The atmosphere between us was charged. He looked worn out, and I felt torn. The love I felt for him was being tested, and doubt transformed into a shadow over us. What do you want me to do? He asked, his voice low and almost desperate. I don't know, Jake. I looked out the window, trying to find an answer somewhere. I just need time to think, to understand if I can trust you again. You're right to want to think. I don't want to pressure you. But please, don't make me believe that it's all over. The sadness in his voice was palpable. I'm not saying it's over, just that I need some time. The truth was I didn't know if I could get past the disappointment. Maybe we should give each other some space. I want to understand my feelings before moving forward. He nodded slowly, and the pain in his eyes was almost unbearable. If that's what you need, I'll respect it. But know that I'm here. I will always be. You are unique to me. And with that, the conversation that was once filled with expectation and joy transformed into a moment of uncertainty and pain. We pulled away, a heavy silence hanging between us. As I left the cafe, the cool afternoon breeze couldn't dissipate the sadness I felt. I was so confused. What was love but a tangle of hopes and fears? As I walked home, Jake's words echoed in my mind, but doubt still lingered like a shadow. I wanted to believe, but the fear of getting hurt again was present. What did I really want? And, more importantly, what was my heart willing to accept? Determined to learn more about Jake, my heart beat like a drum in a parade. On that sunny morning, I felt like a detective searching for clues, determined to understand what was really going on in his life. I knew I needed to investigate, but the idea of delving into a world that could hurt me even more made me nervous. The cafe was crowded, but I was alone, lost in thought. The cups clinked in the background, and the smell of fresh coffee wrapped around me like a warm hug. Sarah, the voice of a mutual friend, Alex, interrupted my daydream. He approached my table, a friendly smile on his face. Are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost. Alex. I'm not sure how to explain. I'm trying to understand some things about Jake, I replied, taking a sip of my drink. You've known him longer, right? Yeah, a little. What do you want to know? He settled into the chair across from me, curious. About his ex-girlfriend. I saw some messages and, well, I'm confused. He said she was just a friend, but look, Sarah. Alex sighed, glancing around before leaning in closer. The truth is that the story between Jake and that girl is complicated. They broke up a while ago, but she's still in his life. He's trying to distance himself, but it's hard. My heart sank. I had already suspected the situation was more complicated than Jake had let on. Do you think he still likes her? I don't know. What I do know is that Jake is a good guy, but he also has baggage. You need to be sure of what you really want. It's not worth getting hurt because of his past. As soon as Alex left, my mind was a storm. I decided I needed to confront Jake again, but the words felt heavy in my mouth. The day dragged on until finally, it was time for our meeting. The sun was setting, painting the sky orange and pink, a spectacle I used to love, but now it felt dull. I arrived at the park where we agreed to meet, and while I waited, I couldn't shake the feeling of vulnerability. When Jake appeared, what should have been a joyful moment turned into a sea of uncertainty. He looked so handsome with his carefree smile, but I knew there were many shadows behind it. "Hi, Sarah." He approached, his eyes shining with the evening light. "You look beautiful." "Hi, Jake," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "We need to talk." The atmosphere shifted instantly. He furrowed his brow, concern washing over his face. "Of course, what happened?" "About your ex-girlfriend. Alex told me some things. He said you still have feelings for her." I said, my voice trembling a bit. "Is that true?" Jake hesitated, and silence lingered. "Yes, it's true that she was an important part of my life," he finally admitted, looking down. "But we broke up. I was trying to distance myself from her, Sarah. What I feel for you is real. But you're still tense about it. I don't know if I can compete with someone who's still part of your life," I said, the sadness building in my chest. "You don't have to compete. I'm here with you now. You're who I want." The sincerity in his voice touched me, but the insecurity still consumed me. "I just don't know how to handle this. And what if I can't handle it? What if you decide to go back to her?" The words slipped out before I could hold them back, and I could see the pain in his eyes. "Sarah, that's not going to happen. I don't want that past anymore. I just need time to sort some things out within myself," he said, his voice low and heavy with emotion. What he was saying was comforting, but not enough to calm the storm inside me. The fear of losing what was beginning to blossom between us paralyzed me. "Maybe we need some time, some space," I suggested, the words escaping like a whisper. He looked at me, his face marked by confusion. "Are you serious?" "I don't want that, Sarah. I'm willing to fight for you." "I know, but I can't keep going like this. I can't live with her shadow hanging over us," I said, the pain reflecting in every word. The tension between us was palpable. Jake took a step toward me but hesitated. "Please don't do this. I love you. I want you to be part of my life." "I want that too, Jake. But I can't enter a relationship where the past is still so present. I need to focus on my art, on myself," I said, the firmness in my voice surprising me. Finally, the reality of what we were facing settled between us like an invisible barrier. He nodded slowly, the sadness in his eyes cutting through my heart. "If that's what you want, I'll respect it. But know that I won't give up on us." We looked at each other, and in that moment, all I wanted was for things to be different. The desire to be with him was strong, but the pain of uncertainty left me exhausted. "I just need some time," I murmured. "Time to think." He took a step back, and the distance between us seemed to expand. "If that's what you need, I'll give it. But I'll wait for you, Sarah. Always." And with those words, we said goodbye. As I walked home, the pain of separation weighed heavily on my heart. The sky was dark now, and the city felt colder. The vibrant colors of the sunset had faded, and I felt lost in a maze of emotions. When I got home, the first thing I did was go to my studio. The blank canvases stared back at me, waiting for inspiration that felt distant. The smell of paint and solvent was familiar, but today, there was no creativity flowing through me. Just emptiness. I sat in front of the canvas, but the ideas that used to overflow began to slip away from the edges. Why is this happening? I whispered to myself, feeling frustration grow. The love that was beginning to blossom between Jake and me was now a battlefield between insecurity and desire. How could I turn this pain into art when the only thing I wanted was for things to be different? The hours passed, and I lost myself in thoughts, unable to put a single brushstroke on the canvas. What was once a refuge had now become a prison. The image of Jake, his intense eyes and his smile, came and went like waves in a stormy sea. And as the night wore on, I knew I needed to find a way to deal with this pain, but the idea of distancing myself from him still weighed heavily on my mind. The silence of the house echoed, and I wondered if this was the price to pay for the pursuit of true love. Sitting at the cafe table, with the aroma of fresh coffee mingling with the sweet scent of cakes and pies, I tried to focus on the blank page in front of me. The world around me felt like a blur, and I could barely remember the last time a stroke of mine had captured the essence of something real. What I felt for Jake was still a jumble of emotions intertwined within me, like the colors I tried to put on paper. A month had passed since I decided to step away from him, and the longing had turned into a sharp pain, as if each beat of my heart was a reminder of everything we could have had. I looked to the side, where people were animatedly chatting, laughing, and sharing moments. A part of me wanted to be part of that joy, but the other part still struggled against the uncertainty Jake had brought into my life. He had been a ray of light in my life, but that light began to dim when the shadows of his past insisted on surfacing. "Sarah?" The familiar voice of Jake echoed in my thoughts, and I immediately turned toward the source. He was standing at the cafe door, with his piercing gaze and a hopeful expression on his face. My heart raced, and I found myself torn between the urge to run to him and the desire to lock myself away in my world again. Sheka. My voice came out quieter than expected, and I realized that the whole cafe seemed to fade away, leaving just the two of us in that moment. "Can I sit down?" he asked, almost hesitantly, as if he knew I might say no. The internal battle I was fighting was fierce. On one hand, I wanted to embrace the comfort his presence brought me, but on the other, the pain of betrayal still burned in my chest and held me back. "Of course." The response slipped from my lips before I could think better of it, and he sat down across from me, with a shy smile that couldn't hide his anxiety. "I missed you." He broke the silence, and his eyes sparkled with a sincerity that almost made me believe everything could go back to normal. "I tried to reach out, but you seemed so distant. Jake, my words got stuck in my throat. What could I say? That I was confused? That the memory of the messages still haunted me?" He raised his hand, asking me to stop. "I understand. You have every right to feel that way. I just want you to know that I'm here, and that I want to fight for us." He leaned forward, the intensity of his gaze penetrating me. "Fight for us." I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. "Don't you think you've fought enough with your past? I can't be a second choice, Jake." "You were never a second choice, Sarah. The woman in the messages, she's just a friend. An ex who still needs help. I don't know how you found out, but it hurt to know you thought I could betray you." His voice was a whisper, almost like a confession. I wanted to believe him, but doubts still hovered over us like a dark cloud. "Why didn't you tell me before? Why didn't you let me understand?" I felt frustration rising, and the vulnerability I felt left me exposed. "Because I was scared. Scared you would leave me. Scared my truth would push you further away." He leaned back in his chair, his shoulders heavy with the weight of his words. "But the truth is I can't live like this. I care too much about you, Sarah. Those words touched my heart in a way I didn't expect. It was as if he was trying to open up to me, showing a side I still didn't know. I'm confused. I need time. He nodded, and the sadness in his eyes was almost palpable. I understand, and I don't want to pressure you. But please, don't exclude me from your life. I can be a friend if that's what you need right now. I thought time would help clear my thoughts, but inside, the whirlwind of emotions intensified. I needed time for myself, away from Jake and all this confusion. An idea began to form in my mind, something that could help me find clarity. I need some time alone. I need to travel. The declaration came out as a whisper, but I knew it was the right decision. I needed to reconnect with myself and my art. Travel. He seemed surprised, but quickly recovered. Where to? Maybe I'll go to the coast. To a place where I can think and find inspiration. I looked out the window, imagining the waves breaking on the sand, the sea breeze caressing my face. Sarah, I don't want you to distance yourself from me. The pleading in his voice made my heart ache, but I knew it was necessary. I'm not distancing myself from you. I'm stepping away from all this that's happening. I need time to reflect on us. I felt a tear slide down my cheek, and I quickly wiped it away. I'm sorry. Don't apologize. If this is what you need, I'll respect it. But I'll be here, waiting for you always. He reached out his hand across the table, and I hesitated but eventually took it. The warmth of his skin brought me a comfort I didn't know if I deserved. Thank you, Jake. The words came from me with sincerity. I didn't know what the future held, but in that moment, I knew that the only person who could help me find my way was myself. In the days that followed, I immersed myself in my preparations. The idea of traveling filled me with an almost childlike excitement. I dreamed of the freedom to explore new places, to lose myself in unknown landscapes. Yet, with each passing day, I felt Jake's absence like an open wound, a constant reminder of what I left behind. Finally, on the day of the trip, I got in my car and headed toward the coast. The road unfolded before me, and I turned on the radio to let the music accompany me. The songs spoke of love, loss, and new beginnings. Each chord seemed to resonate within me, and I couldn't help but let tears stream down my face. It was a mix of pain and hope, and I knew I had to face these feelings. When I arrived at the beach, the sun was beginning to set, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink. I got out of the car and took a deep breath, feeling the cool sea breeze. The waves gently lapped at the sand, and I let myself be carried away by the beauty of the moment. With a notebook in hand, I began to draw. With each stroke, each line, I felt I was reconnecting with the part of myself that had been lost. And it was there, before the vast ocean, that I realized love is complicated, but worth fighting for. Jake was a part of my life now, and I needed to find out if he was the inspiration I had been searching for or a shadow that would keep me from shining. I was determined to find that answer, no matter what it took. When I received the message from Jake asking to meet, a whirlwind of emotions swept over me. The trip I took helped me reflect on many things, but deep down, I was still confused. What I felt for him was intense, but doubts and insecurities consumed me. With my heart in a state of battle, I decided to meet him. After all, I needed to understand if there was still something between us. As I entered the cafe, the smell of fresh coffee and homemade cakes engulfed me, but my focus was on Jake. He was there, standing next to a wall decorated with photos. My legs hesitated for a moment, but I moved forward. Upon seeing me, his face lit up with a smile that warmed more than the coffee I was holding. "Hi, Sarah. I'm so glad you came," he said, his intense gaze fixed on mine. It was as if the rest of the world had disappeared. "Hi, Jake." What's all this? I asked, pointing at the photos. My heart raced, not just from his presence, but from the anticipation of what was to come. It's an exhibition. All the photos were taken with you in mind, he replied, a bit nervous, but with a sparkle in his eyes. I want you to see how I see you. I felt a wave of emotions. The photographs were incredible, capturing moments we shared, but also reflecting the essence of who I was. One in particular caught my attention. It was an image of me, lost in thought, painting in a park. The sunlight filtered through the leaves of the trees, creating an almost magical effect. Jake, this is beautiful, I murmured, touching the frame of the photo. Do you really see me like this? Yes, he said, taking a step closer. I've never met anyone who inspires me as much as you do. And I promised myself I wouldn't let the past ruin what we could have. That touched me deeply. The memory of the messages I found on his phone was still fresh in my mind, but I was willing to listen to what he had to say. So, are you going to explain those messages to me? What do they really mean? Jake took a deep breath, seeming to prepare for a difficult moment. The woman I was talking to, she's my sister, Sarah. She's going through a tough time, and I was trying to help. There was never anything romantic between us. I felt my heart slow a bit. I was about to protest, but he continued. I know it seems complicated, but I never lied to you. I just didn't know how to tell you. I didn't want you to think I was being dishonest. Why didn't you tell me before? You know how much those messages hurt me, I said, frustration evident in my voice. I was scared of losing you, scared that you wouldn't understand, Jake replied, his voice full of sincerity. I should have been more transparent, and I'm really sorry for that. I looked at him, trying to process everything. The words coming out of his mouth seemed genuine, but the pain of betrayal still lingered. So, you were always committed to your sister? Why didn't you tell me that before? Because, in my mind, it was a temporary situation. I really thought she was recovering, and that soon things would go back to normal. I didn't want to involve you in this, but I realized that by not telling you, I created a chasm between us, Jake said, his eyes reflecting deep regret. The silence between us stretched as I tried to understand if I could trust him again. I looked at the photos, at all those moments he had captured, and something inside me began to change. I don't want to lose what we have, Jake. I feel so alive when I'm with you, but I can't live with uncertainty. I promise I'll do whatever it takes to prove that you can trust me. I don't want our love to be overshadowed by something I couldn't explain in time, he stated, stepping closer to me. I don't know if I can just forget what happened, but I want to try to understand you better, I said, my voice soft but firm. You've inspired me to be better, to see life through different eyes. I can't just leave that behind. Jake smiled, and there was a glimmer of hope in his eyes. Let's do this together. I want you to know my life, my family. I want you to see that what we have is real and worth fighting for. Okay, I murmured, feeling that maybe, just maybe, he was right. The uncertainty still hung in the air, but the idea of building something real with him was tempting. But I need time to process all of this. I understand, and I'll respect your time, he said, gently holding my hand. I just want you to know that I'm here for you always. His words warmed me. The weight I carried in my heart began to dissipate a little. The love I felt for him hadn't vanished. In fact, it seemed stronger now, more genuine. As I looked at the photos, I realized that each one not only captured a moment but also a feeling, a connection that was still alive between us. You have an incredible way of capturing the essence of people, Jake. That's a gift, I said, looking at him. And I wanted to be a part of your life. I want you to be part of mine too. With a radiant smile, Jake moved closer, and in a gentle gesture, pulled me in. Our eyes met, and in that moment, everything seemed to align. The past, with its shadows and secrets, couldn't keep me from feeling what was growing between us. "Let's create new memories then," he suggested, his eyes shining with excitement. "Yes, let's," I replied, feeling a mix of joy and relief. And as we embraced, I realized that the pain and distrust were slowly being replaced by a new beginning. When our lips met in a soft kiss, I felt we were ready to face whatever came next. Love is a path full of surprises, and in that moment, I knew we were ready to walk this journey together, side by side.